consumer boycotts are the reason that President Trump and some of his team have referred to Canada as being mean and nasty to deal with.
Ontario's premier says Canada needs to match President Donald Trump's tariffs dollar for dollar.
Donald Trump doesn't usually hold back, but this time, his words triggered something deeper than political drama. Standing before a crowd of business leaders in Washington, his hand-picked ambassador to Canada explained why Trump sees Canadians as mean and nasty to deal with. Not because of military threats or major trade violations, but because Canadians are quietly boycotting U.S. travel and refusing to buy American alcohol. On the surface, it sounded like a throwaway insult, but what it revealed was something far more telling: that the Canadian public's grassroots reaction, one without protests or megaphones, was working. It began with tariffs. Steel, lumber, aluminum, sectors deeply tied to Canadian jobs, were suddenly slapped with high U.S. duties in early 2025. Then came the rhetoric. Trump's remarks about Canada taking advantage of America sparked anger and confusion. Instead of shouting back, Canadians changed their habits. By July 2025, according to data from international travel platforms like Hopper and Expedia, flights from Canada to the US dropped by over 26%. Alberta and British Columbia led the decline. Meanwhile, Canadian liquor boards from Ontario to Quebec reported a dramatic drop in American alcohol sales. In some cases, shelves were restocked entirely with domestic or European brands. At the same time, retail movements like Buy Canadian surged. Independent shops across Ottawa, Montreal, and Vancouver said their sales of Canadian-made goods had doubled compared to the same period last year. What started as a reaction became a movement, and it got Washington's attention.
Obviously, Canadians are outraged. I say Canadians, stick with it, hold the line.
BC Premier David Eby says Hoekstra's remarks show Canada's efforts to stand up to Trump are, quote, having an impact.
If Trump thought provinces would buckle under pressure, he misread the room. British Columbia Premier David Eby publicly challenged the tone coming out of Washington. He didn't just defend the boycott, he said it was proof that Canadians were finally being heard. In Ontario, Premier Doug Ford took a different but equally firm approach. Instead of backing down, he called on Ottawa to respond with equal tariffs, dollar for dollar. In his words, showing weakness would only invite more pressure. Across the political spectrum, premiers aligned on one message: Canadians have the right to protect their economy and sovereignty, even if that means spending differently.
We should note
to our friends and neighbors in Canada, the Granite State sends you our greetings and says we miss you.
The ambassador's comments may have sparked outrage, but not everyone in the U.S. echoed that tone. Just days later, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators visited Ottawa. Unlike the ambassador, they didn't criticize Canadians. They expressed concern. New Hampshire's Maggie Hassan and Nevada's Catherine Cortez Masto noted how their states were already feeling the pain. Canadian tourism was down, shopping districts were quieter, and hospitality jobs were at risk. In Nevada alone, Canadians usually account for 30% of international visitors. That number has sharply declined this summer, and with it, millions in revenue. What Canadians chose to do with their vacation dollars was no longer a small matter. It was reshaping cross-border economics.
Many in Ottawa say Trump's rhetoric just strengthens their resolve to buy Canadian and boycott travel down south.
Some might say skipping a trip or switching a brand is too small to matter. But collectively, these choices created pressure, the kind that even Trump's administration couldn't ignore. This wasn't about emotion, it was about agency. Canadians didn't need to shout, their wallets spoke for them. And if those choices made them seem mean and nasty, then perhaps that label was never really an insult, but a sign of strength.
I think Trump is Trump, and we listen to him, and then we just let what he says go through one ear and out the other.
In the end, this moment isn't about diplomatic language, it's about posture. Trump may dominate headlines, but Canada, quietly and collectively, is demonstrating resolve. Not through threats, not through deals, but through everyday decisions made by people, provinces, and premiers to stand their ground, protect what's theirs, and define what kind of neighbor they choose to be. Because if mean and nasty means refusing to bow under pressure, then Canada is wearing it well.
short-term thing. China's influence on the world stage has been growing and America's has been declining. It seems to have accelerated in the last few months.
Trump's tariffs were supposed to make America stronger. Instead, they've exposed just how much leverage the country has already lost, not only in global trade, but in global leadership.
The numbers for the full year should have gone up. But because of tariffs, companies withdrew their guidance and left to their own devices. Wall Street cut numbers for the full year, expecting tariffs were going to take a big bite out of business.
President Donald Trump returned to office promising to finish what he started: break global trade dependencies, revive American manufacturing, and force allies into reciprocal trade deals. His signature weapon? Tariffs. On April 2nd, what he called Liberation Day, the administration announced sweeping tariffs of 10 to 50% on over 100 countries. Canada faced 35%, the EU 30%, China 50%. But instead of forcing trade partners to fold, the strategy is falling flat. According to Morgan Stanley Investment Management, U.S. companies in Q2 2025 showed stronger than expected earnings. Not because tariffs helped, but because Wall Street had slashed expectations too sharply earlier in the year. Companies had withdrawn guidance out of caution, assuming tariffs would bite deep. But those fears didn't fully materialize. What did happen? Supply chains rerouted, costs shifted, and a wave of confusion left investors cautious. Tariffs didn't crash the markets, but they didn't boost domestic production either. Industrial growth remains sluggish. Input prices have edged up. The economic logic behind Trump's strategy is now under serious scrutiny.
I think that's right, Ali. Exactly right. I think if you were to look back at public opinion polling from the first Trump administration, you would also have seen the gap close between the United States and China on the global stage.
Well, China is the world's largest producer of steel, of aluminum. They produce 2/3 of the world's electric vehicles.
While the economic results remain mixed, the geopolitical cost is becoming crystal clear. Longtime allies are walking away, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. European officials now describe the U.S. as an unreliable partner. Trade talks with the EU have stalled. Japan and South Korea are signing independent energy deals with Canada, bypassing Washington. What's more, Trump's foreign policy choices, cutting USAID funding, slashing international education programs, and walking back diversity initiatives in universities, have eaten into America's soft power. According to Freedom House, the number of democracies worldwide has declined for 19 straight years. Trump didn't start that trend, but analysts say he's accelerating it. U.S. influence used to come not only from the dollar or the Pentagon, but from trust. That trust is eroding, and nothing is replacing it. As Washington raises walls, others are building bridges. China, once hesitant, now responds with full confidence. In April, Beijing imposed retaliatory tariffs as high as 84% on U.S. goods. It restricted rare earth exports, tightened import licenses, and deepened Belt and Road investments. Over $1 trillion has been pledged across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, with little U.S. competition in sight. Even more striking is Canada's response. After being hit with 35% tariffs, Ottawa didn't just retaliate with its own 25% levies. It went further. Prime Minister Mark Carney launched an economic realignment strategy, boosting trade with Mexico and the EU, slashing exposure to U.S. supply chains, and coordinating regional alternatives. Tourism from Canada to the U.S. dropped over 40% in June, according to international booking platforms. Some provinces banned American alcohol from public events, and Canadian consumers, quietly, began choosing differently. Trump's tariff-first doctrine was designed to project power. But in practice, it's revealed a painful truth. Power doesn't come from shouting louder. It comes from being needed. And in 2025, more nations are showing they can walk away. China is no longer waiting for U.S. permission. Canada is no longer asking for exemptions. Allies are looking elsewhere, and they're finding options. What Trump promised as strength is starting to look like isolation, and the world is moving on, with or without the United States.
The MAGA fault line seems to be widening from a fracture into a Grand Canyon-sized chasm after President Trump called the very MAGA supporters who reelected him stupid and foolish for refusing his demand to back off the Epstein files.
Donald Trump is facing something his presidency wasn't built to survive: rejection. Not from his political opponents, but from his base and from America's closest allies. At home, the Epstein controversy has fractured MAGA. Abroad, Canada, the country once most tightly linked to the U.S. economy, is pulling back. The Trump strategy of power through loyalty is now being tested by the one thing it never planned for: disloyalty.
Couple reasons. Number one, I do think that the MAGA base will follow Trump on policy wherever he goes. The reason this is different is because this contradicts who Donald Trump has shown his base to be since he erupted into the political scene in 2015. Donald Trump.
The Epstein case, long dormant in public memory, has erupted again, and this time, it's not Democrats fueling the flames. It's MAGA itself. In recent weeks, prominent figures within the pro-Trump media ecosystem have turned against the president over his refusal to pursue full disclosure of the Epstein files. These are the very influencers who helped build the MAGA identity, and now they're accusing Trump of betrayal. Trump's response was blunt. He dismissed the renewed focus on Epstein as a distraction and told his base to move on. That only made things worse. His most loyal followers are now questioning whether Trump is shielding the very elite power structure he once promised to expose. This isn't just frustration, it's a breakdown in identity. The narrative of draining the swamp was foundational to MAGA. The Epstein list was supposed to be proof of that mission. And now, Trump's unwillingness to act is being seen not as strategy, but as surrender. Inside the White House, several options have reportedly been considered: appointing a special counsel, holding daily briefings, even a press tour by former Florida AG Pam Bondi. None of it happened. Trump believes saying "it's over" should be enough. But his base doesn't agree. Commentators close to the movement now warn that 10% of the MAGA vote could walk away, a figure that could cost Republicans up to 40 House seats in 2026. There's a reason Trump is stonewalling. He likely knows what's in the redacted sections of the Epstein documents. The fear isn't just political, it may be personal or legal. And that fear is paralyzing his ability to lead the very movement he created.
We don't want to do this anymore.
Ontario, where Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled a set of measures to protect the Canadian steel industry. The move coming as the steel sector in Canada struggles under the weight of 50% U.S. tariffs.
While Trump faces revolt at home, abroad, his trade strategy is pushing allies away. On June 4th, the U.S. imposed a 50% tariff on Canadian steel. Canada's response came in mid-July, when Prime Minister Mark Carney announced sweeping measures to protect the domestic steel industry. These included strict import quotas, a 25% tariff on Chinese-origin steel, and a new procurement rule: Canadian steel for Canadian projects. Ottawa also committed 70 million Canadian dollars for worker retraining, part of a broader plan to shift away from dependence on the U.S. market. The timing was no accident. Trade talks between the U.S. and Canada are ongoing, with Trump threatening a broader 35% tariff on all Canadian imports starting August 1st. Carney's message is clear. Canada will no longer wait passively. The alliance may survive, but not unconditionally. Donald Trump's rise was built on controlling the story. But now, both the MAGA base and U.S. allies are writing their own. In the U.S., the Epstein issue is not going away. In Canada, the trade relationship is being redefined without Washington's lead. This isn't collapse, but it is contraction of trust, control, and credibility. Trump isn't losing to Democrats or foreign adversaries. He's losing ground to the very people who once followed him without question.